The prison asylum reform movement started in the 1840s. The goal of this movement was to change people's perspective and the way they approached the mentally ill, accused, and the poor. It was to emphasize treatment for mentally ill people and provide them with reform and rehabilitation.
Prior to this reform, much of the mentally ill population in America were treated harshly. They were held against their will in almshouses, cells, and workhouses. They often faced inhumane conditions such as lack of healthy food, clean water, and solitary confinement. Many were left for dead in the street or in their cells.
By this time, however, people sought to change everything. Dorothea Dix was a reformer who led the movement to reform prisons and mental asylums. Her efforts to help the mentally ill and prisoners helped create tons of institutions across the U.S. and Europe. It helped change people's understanding of these populations.
Dorothy Dix was one of the first Americans to open asylums. Her goal was to use moral treatment to help the mentally ill to reform and cure them. Many of their patients were from different ethnicities and classes, but she ensured they were all treated equally. She and many other nurses helped to create the asylum system in America without using harsh punishments.
These asylums were often large buildings decorated ornately that could have been found in calm areas away from any disruptions. Asylums offered work and relaxation to patients to teach them to be good members of society once released.
Reforms had also centered around justice institutions. The idea of incarceration as punishment was fairly new and American. Capital and corporal punishments were the main sentences to wrongdoings, while shortened jail time was used to hold the accused. Americans wanted a change, and with new Enlightenment ideals spreading, the ideas of incarceration were planted in their heads by thinkers such as Thomas Paine and Cesare Beccaria. The first penitentiaries were built in the Northeast in states such as Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Inmates often faced cruel standards, being cut off from society and the rest of the population. Solitary confinement and cramped conditions were common in these prisons, and unsanitary food and water posed threats to inmates. Hard labor and other cruel practices were used to teach inmates to repent their sins and reform themselves to be useful citizens. The effectiveness of these penitentiaries is controversial, as many did not discourage high crimes that these prisons were meant to control, and many crimes still occurred in prison walls.
Workhouses were designed to provide a refuge for the poor, mentally ill, and elderly people. Instead of providing these people with food, clothing, and basic needs in exchange for work, they became more of a prison system. The government's intention was to tear down expenses on poverty by setting up a cruel system. In these workhouses, there also came very harsh conditions. Diseases spread like wildfire, the poor were bathed under supervision, and more. Though these facilities were made to provide safety for people that couldn't support themselves, it made being poor horrible. It would make the poor continue to work at all costs. Being poor began to carry an intensity on the overviews of others. Poorhouses were then placed outside for public view to bring shame on them.
The movement convinced people that prisons and asylums needed hospitable settings. After this reform, the mentally ill got humanely treated, and it overall improved the conditions of asylum facilities across the United States. However, many mistakes were made, particularly in the penitentiary system and workhouse systems, that we still use to this day to develop better solutions.